This is one of the crazy things about real estate is that you don't have to just make one profit on one property. I've this is my third profit center on the same property.
Welcome to the Golden Nuggets of Real Estate Investing, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve financial freedom through real estate. We'll be discussing the most important lessons, or better known as the Golden Nuggets of Real Estate Investing, entrepreneurship, and personal finance with new and experienced investors to help you get into real estate investing or scale up your portfolio. So make sure to tune in. What's going on, everyone? It's Ross Nadai. I'm a real estate agent, an investor, and host of the Real Estate Golden Nuggets podcast. I have an amazing episode full of golden nuggets for you. If you like this podcast and gotten any value out of it, please share this far and wide to reach as many people as possible. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date on the most recent episodes. Thank you so much for your support. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another great episode of Real Estate Golden Nuggets. I have a very special guest on board today. I have Cam here, who's an investor. He's invested pretty much in different regions, but he's heavily invested in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And what I like about his strategy is he's a man of all sorts of skills. He's done land development, he has rent to owns, and he has buy and hold. So he has lots of experience, and I'm so grateful to have him on board today to share his journey, his experience with the rest of you guys. So without further ado, Cam, if you can please just give us a little bit of introduction about yourself for the folks that don't know, and tell us a little bit about, what your portfolio looks like and so forth. So go ahead, please.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. It's great to be here with you, and I'm excited to share a bit about my journey, and because we're all on different journeys in terms of where we come from and where we're heading, all that sort of stuff. And so, in a nutshell, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad back in 2006, and I bought my first rental property after reading that book, basically using the basic principles, and I just loved it, and I ended up getting a few more doors, bought a bunch of education, and then I was at a point where it's like I wanted to do this full time. I'd been working with a church organization for 17 years, and I felt it was time for me to personally move on. And so, my 5 buy, rent, and holds weren't going to cash flow enough for me to quit my day job with 3 kids at home and well, I was going to say a mortgage. I had several mortgages. Most of them were covered for, but I had my own primary mortgage, and that's when I remembered rent-own lease option is a way of flipping deals on their heads in terms of cash flow, right? Because buy, rent, and holds, you typically don't generate a lot of cash flow if you're doing it correctly, where you're putting money aside for future stuff. Rent-owns is like higher cash flow. Now your overhead is low because you've got either the owner or you've got your tenant buyer looking after the property. Anyway, sorry, you can tell I'm excited about this. I'm just going to jump into the details already.
Love it.
Yeah, so 2010, I quit my day job doing lease option deals, and it's just kind of never quit doing it. And from 2010 to 2015, I scaled from 5 doors to 45 doors. In those 5 years, those 40 doors were all essentially no money down deals for me. So it's a fantastic strategy to grow quickly, to increase your cash flow. And so, yeah, and in that time, I've done a ton of other stuff. I've, as many people, I have struggled with a shiny object syndrome. And so I've learned some hard lessons with that, and we can go into some of that stuff. But, I keep coming back to rent-own lease options. And for the last 3 years, I've been coaching other investors how to successfully do the strategy as well. So that's a little bit about me.
What that entails, and how does somebody jump into, that sort of strategy? How do you convince somebody to invest with you with no money down? Because we hear that quite a lot, but what does that actually mean? How do you generate and get to that point?
Basically, it's the idea that, you've got a property, and either you're helping somebody get out of a property, and you're taking control of the property, that's essentially what I call a no money down deal. So, so I run the deal, but I didn't have to qualify for a mortgage, and I didn't have to qualify with 20% down of the purchase price, right? Usually those transactions for me represented by $100 check, right? And it's a check because then it's traceable. Cash is not traceable once you do
Right.
it. So when I talk about these no money down deals, I'm actually spending $100 per deal. I hope that's okay to call that a no money down deal, but it's better than spending 60 grand. I'd much rather spend 100 and control the deal and get cash flow from it. So there's so many different ways, right? So part of my portfolio is helping other families get into home ownership who couldn't otherwise get into home ownership, right? So I'm not talking about low income, stuff like that. These are people who've got good jobs. They've got enough money for mortgage payments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like often people just think, rent to own, they equate that with low income and that sort of stuff. So when I help a tenant buyer, right, a rent to own client into one of my properties, they're usually putting $10,000 down plus or minus. They're giving that to me and my company, and we're putting them into the property. They've got enough income to qualify for the mortgage, but the bank isn't saying yes to them yet. So over the course of 3 years, we help them build up a down payment with us, right? Starting with that $10,000 up front, and then, usually $300 to $500 extra each month. So that after 3 years, they've got about 7% of the purchase price of the property. And then we also help them build or repair their credit. So that's a part of my business that is helping people get into home ownership. Now, there's so many other areas because, if you've seen any of my stuff, you've heard me talk about, working with tired and frustrated landlords. And tired and frustrated landlords are an awesome resource to find properties to help people out of a headache,
right?
And help. Really, what you become is their exit strategy. But then you pick up a property for $100. And, with a bunch of paperwork, and then now you control the property. So whether or not you want to turn around and put a rent-to-own client in there, use it as an Airbnb, use it and add it to your portfolio over time. When I did my first one back in 2010, it all started with, I'd been doing my own thing, meaning that I was qualifying for mortgages. I think at that time it was, 10% down as an investor. And little did I know it, but I was a walking elevator pitch, right? An elevator pitch is a really short, enticing representation that makes people want to hear more. So I had a couple friends with them, worked with them at work, and they're basically like, we really are loving what you're doing, and we'd like to invest. We'd have no idea where to start. Could we invest with you? So I said, sure. That I have no idea how we'll do it, but let's figure it out. And it really wasn't on my radar at that point. But anyways, long story short, with that one was, this is kind of around the time when I was starting to explore the idea of doing rent-to-own. So I went out and I looked at a ton of properties, and I would boil them down. If I looked at 100 properties, I looked at seriously at 10. Out of the 10, I would have presented to them 3 different deals, right? I've got a 7-page pro forma. And so long story short with that, they ended up buying the property.
Okay. And
they put down $40,000 at the time, and they qualified for the mortgage. And they never set foot on the property. They trusted me with all the details. I'm sure they drove by it, but so I looked after. Then I found a rent-to-own client to put into it. So my investors over here qualified and bought the property. They had an agreement with me and Mike. Well, at that time it was just me. It wasn't my company. They had an agreement with me that I would pay them rent every month, right? and I would look after all the details of the property. They wouldn't have any tenant phone calls. They wouldn't have any tenant, headaches. If rent was late, I was still paying them, right? So I took on that responsibility. And then I turned around and then I found qualified tenant buyers to put in the property, right? So these guys had $22,000 to put down. That was my first deal. So I got $22K up front. And each month I was paying the owners $1,200, but I was getting $1,400 in total from the tenant buyers. Is that making sense?
Yeah. So walk me through. So say I'm somebody who is interested in that model, right? And I want to get into that. So does that encompass you purchasing the property first and then I come in as a money partner, or how does that work? I guess I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, no, you can do that. You can do it. You can do it with your own properties. I've done it with my own properties. So I work with two types of investors, right? The first is this couple I described to you that they said they wanted to invest with me. I found them a property. So there's lots of people out there like that who've got good incomes. They can qualify for a second, third, or fourth mortgage, and they've got the down payment, but they don't want to be hands-on, swinging a hammer, unplugging a toilet, or dealing with tenants, right? So those are turnkey investors where basically I give them a plug and play house. They just buy it. I look after everything, but then I'll turn around and I'll put a tenant buyer in the property, right? So that's what's called a sandwich lease. And because of sandwich, right? Because the owner, myself, and then the tenant buyer. But now replace these investors that I told you about, these friends of mine, with a tired and frustrated landlord. So the tired and frustrated landlord is someone who's already got a property, but they don't know what to do with it, or they can't unload it, or they're tired of dealing with tenants, any number of things.
Right.
I mean, I've worked with people, it was their own house, and they just didn't want to deal with realtors or having, hundreds of people walk through their house, right? So I secured a deal with them. I became their exit strategy. I've worked with like other investors who've had, 50 doors, and I became their exit strategy over time, right? So one guy, it started with one property, and I think I've taken about 22 properties off his hands over about 5 or 6 years, right?
Wow.
So I became his exit strategy. And so, people who are starting out will go like, well, how did you find these people? And it's just like, once you start doing it, they just start rolling in, because those first investors, excuse me, that asked me if they could invest with me. Like I said, I wasn't hunting for them, but, I had an elevator pitch I didn't realize. And so literally from that one couple, investors like that snowballed over the next 6 years, because they would tell their friends and they would tell their friends. And literally I would have some of these investors who were investing with me would host meetings to tell their friends about what I'm doing. And, if one of their investor friends, he purchased, I would give them a finder's fee, of course, but literally just kept on snowballing. Same with tired and frustrated landlords, right? So, you like tired and frustrated landlords, are looking for someone who they can trust as an exit strategy with a property. So what you end up doing with that property from a tired and frustrated landlord, it can be you put a rental and client into it, you can do a flip with it, you can turn it to a buy, rent, and hold. You can wholesale it. There's all these different exit strategies. But once you start to realize that there are these tired and frustrated landlords out there, and now you just kind of market to them, and most of my deals come to me via word of mouth. I mean, I can't advertise for investors, right? You need a securities license to do that. And so, most of my deals have been through word of mouth. And so it's just kind of grown. And that's why, from 2010 to 2015, I scaled up by 40 doors.
Right.
Like with an average of $10,000 or $12,000 upfront per door from my tenant buyers, and an average cash flow from each property, about 350, right? So you start multiplying 350 a month
Right.
cash flow. That's beside the lease payment. You start
Right.
doing 350 a month times 40 doors a month.
Yeah.
That's your cash flow. You
Right.
start doing $10,000 or $12,000 on each of those 40 deals, and like you can start to see how profitable this can be with focus. And so it's really one of the reasons why I love it so much is just because every deal's a little bit different, and it's about creative problem solving. So
Yeah. I was gonna say. So I think what we really, or what you're tackling is you're trying to solve problems, right? On one aspect, you're dealing with landlords who don't want to deal with management side of the business, where you come in and with whether you kind of take over and buy it from them or wholesale it, or I guess in one aspect, are they still letting you kind of run the show, but they're still owning it, and then you have your own cut in a way, like you're kind of like a property manager, and it sounds like, and then on the
it's
other.
kind of, yeah.
Right. And then on the other, you could potentially just wholesale it, right? Some people just want an exit strategy and they don't want to go deal with realtors and whatnot. And then you just come in and take over the property and give them fast cash, essentially.
Yeah. So basically what happens in all of these deals that we're talking about is that once the paperwork is signed between me and the owner, whether or not if it's a new purchase or the owner's already owned it, once the paperwork is done, I now control the property via paperwork. I control the deal. And, so, they like it because they know that I'm fully invested in the property. I'm not like going, give me the keys to your property and we'll see if I can make some money from it. It's like, I do my due diligence. Once I know I can do something with it, we sign up all the documents. Now I'm running with that property. I've got a commitment to these people, right?
Right.
And so you just kind of keep going with that. So back in 2010, when these friends said they want to invest with me, and we got that first property, and I got that check for $22,000 up front and a total of $1,400 a month. I sat back and looked at the numbers and went, okay, so I just made $22,000 up front. I'm making $200 a month cash flow on a property that the tenants are responsible for repairs. Okay.
Right.
And I've got $100 into it. How many more of these can I do?
Yeah.
And it just hit me. It was like, this is totally duplicatable, because if this couple wanted to do it and they had like no investing experience,
right,
how much more will others want to do this? And then it just kind of took off from there.
So how is this any different than essentially a JV agreement, is what I'm trying to understand, right? Because
yeah, it's very similar to a JV agreement. I think it's much cleaner and a lot less paperwork, in the sense that anytime you do a JV agreement, you got to draw up new documents with a lawyer based on what both parties want.
Right.
Here, I've already got the paperwork drawn up, and it's just like they maintain control, right? The owners maintain control of the fact that they've got the mortgage and their name is on title. So we agree that I'm going to pay them X a month.
Okay.
Right. So on that first deal, I'm going to pay you $1,200 a month, every month. And I'm going to buy it off of you in 3 years at X price. So all the decision making is done ahead of time, just like a really solid joint venture agreement. But if you're starting from scratch on each property with a JV, that really gets expensive. And then you multiply that by, trying to keep track of 40 different JV agreements where they're all a bit different.
Right.
That's a nightmare. Whereas it's like, I tell my investors, this is how I run my program and my systems, and this is the paperwork. And sure, there's maybe some odd tweaks here and there, but for the most part, I would say that they're 95% identical, if not close to that 99% on them. So it just becomes a lot cleaner and a lot faster. So it is very much like a JV, but it's just set up much more plug and play paperwork, so that it's just simple and we can just, keep going.
So what is your typical, like a JV agreement, or in this case, a rent to own look like? Like, do you have a specific timeline to say, hey, Ross is going to be the one purchasing the property. He's going to put the down payment. He's going to go on title. And then in, say, X amount of years, he's going to buy it for, is the amount set predetermined? Is it already in place, or because things change in the market quite a bit, right? So how does that work?
Market changes, and, it's a bit of a crystal ball, but it's an educated crystal ball based on what the market has been doing and where it's projected.
Okay.
I mean, we're in a different market now. We're a little bit in a, people will say for a lot of centers across Canada that we're in a seller's market, and we are, but it's really a sideways market because we don't know what's going to happen, right? Because we've heard of stuff across the country, bidding wars going way over, and we don't know, with all that's going on with the economy, we don't know if we're going to see a huge crash or a huge dollar devaluation or massive inflation, or there's all these things that are kind of swirling out there. So but yeah, all that stuff is determined ahead of time, and it's based on a rate of return. It's so usually what I'm trying to do for my investors is I'm trying to get them about 15% annual return on the money that they put into the project.
I see.
So that becomes the benchmark.
For how many years though? What does a typical, like, I guess, term look like?
3 to 4 years. So that would be 45 to 60% return over the course of those 3 to 4 years. That first deal I keep telling you about back in 2010. So that went 5 years. My investors made 110% on that deal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a return for somebody with, like, who's not managing it at all, right? They save the headache. They don't have to deal with it. They don't gotta see. That's what I love about it, Cam. So it's investing is very sexy on paper, right? But what people don't sometimes realize is the amount of work that it takes, especially when you're the active partner. You have to deal with a lot, right? It may seem easy, but there's management all the time. And I have this conversation quite often with folks, and I'm like, sure, you can have a property manager, but then guess what? You're managing the property manager. Like, that's another job in itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not hands-free investing.
No.
Because you got to manage it. Now, so from my angle of it, it's just more duplicating what I'm already doing, right? So then you can have staff that run the systems and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, my first few were a fair bit of work because I was on a very steep learning curve, right? But once you get up and running, it's so much more, plug and play, and you've got momentum going because you've got a bunch of deals, in play, and getting your fifth one takes about half as much work as your first one.
Absolutely. Yep.
You've got that momentum.
Yeah. So as of right now, and so you mentioned a couple of key things. So because the way you've scaled over time, and you said you have a company, so do you have employees that work with you and they're kind of helping you manage these, large portfolio, or is it primarily run by yourself? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, great question. So I've ebbed and flowed. So I've got several different companies, and they're all real estate based. And so, you hear mostly about all the sexy stuff, from people. I've had a business with a couple of partners that failed miserably about 3 years ago, and it affected everything. And so I was at about 4 staff. I'm down to myself and 1.5 other people right now. And so, yeah, it is what it is. And you just keep trucking along. And, I think that's so important, whether you think it or not. Everybody's in sales, and there's just a lot of no's in sales, period. Right.
Absolutely. And you have to be okay with that. You got to learn that.
That's just it. My kids have taught me so much about sales, because children are the best salespeople. They are just persistent beyond all belief, and they don't give up, right? And that's how we have to be in life as adults when we're trying to achieve our goals. We have to be persistent and not give up.
Absolutely, I love that. And, that's a very fair assessment for sure, especially when it comes to any sort of business, any aspect in life. Absolutely, you can't just give up the first time you fall on your face, right? You know how to get up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because usually one of the things I like to ask folks is, because we learn our success comes from failures. So, do you mind sharing perhaps some of your failures and kind of what you learned from those, that perhaps people listening can avoid, getting themselves into, or at least know of?
It's probably three things that jump right out at me. One is, don't fake it till you make it. Lots of people will talk about faking it till you make it, and I just think I tried it, and I faked it so bad that I made it. Uh, it just, people see through that. And so what I tell my students now is like, you know what, like, because so many people want to have the right answers before they do anything, right? They want to be perfect. Our school system has taught us that way, right?
That's
You
right.
don't hand it in until it's perfect. Well, it's just like, that's going to take you forever. And so, simple task, make a phone call to a for sale by owner. Well, what, I don't know what to say. What if he asked me this, or what if he asked me that? And you spend days and weeks on that, and then analysis paralysis kicks in, and then it's like they don't have any results. Therefore, real estate sucks, right? And so what I say is, you know what? If you've got some basic information, what you do, make the phone call, ask some questions. They're going to ask you stuff that you don't have the answers to. You know
Right.
what? That's okay, because what it's going to do for you is first of all, you say, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that. Let me get back to you. So now you were genuine, right? That's a check mark right there.
That's right.
Secondly, it gives you a legit reason to call back, right? Because sales is about repeated contacts.
Yeah.
So, and then if you go out and actually find the answer and then come back, that's another check mark. Like, whoa, this person actually did what they said they were going to do. And now you've got another touch point, right? So don't fake it till you make it. Just be real. And it's okay if you don't have all the answers. That actually produces more fruit, because you can get more information. You're going to learn more, because you're not learning in a vacuum anymore. You're learning by real life questions, not what the fear inside of you thinks the questions are going to be. It's going to be real life questions. So don't fake it till you make it. Choose your partners wisely. In terms of who you work with,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
would
very
say
important
it's
one.
a big one for that. Is even when folks are doing a lot of joint ventureships, and it's very attractive when you have someone coming in with money in their hand and they're like, here. No, you got to be careful. You got to vet them, because this is a long-term relationship. I think I'm glad you brought it up again. I think one of the biggest things that we miss out, especially when the sales, is it's all relationships. You have to maintain relationships. It's not about
Mhm.
quantity; it's about quality, right? So make sure you have a fine understanding. You both are on the same page, because you don't want to run into a scenario where things are not working well, and their expectations are of something else and yours is something else, and then you have this whole headache, right? You want to eliminate it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to find out who their past partners are, right? You want to practice safe partnership here. And it's true. It really is true. And and then the third one is I'm not sure how to summarize this, but basically it's like we get so caught up in the flash of we get some money, and we want the lifestyle, whether that's vacation or expensive clothes or cars and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that stuff is can come and go so quick, and it can go really quick if you don't know how to manage it, right? So some of the early mistakes I made was not managing that part of my life, as well as having full control of where my money is coming from and where it's going, right? It was
Right.
like, checks were coming in and investors were buying properties for me. They're writing me checks so I learned some hard lessons that way in terms of, just, managing money really is what it comes down to.
Right.
And not allowing the shiny object to detract from the business. Right. And so,
Yeah, lifestyle changes, right? And that's what it is. If you make a little bit more money and you go spend that, you just upgrade it. So guess what? Now you're as broke as you were before because now you have to maintain that lifestyle, right? So I totally agree with you. So frugality, I think, especially for investors starting out, is a very key component to it. I'm not by any means. I'm not saying don't live the lifestyle you want to, but you have to be just careful because at the end of the day, this is a business. So for a business to continue to grow, you have to keep reinvesting in it. So don't blow all the money that you made. Make sure that you have this continuous plan and you can keep pushing for it if that's what your objective and goals are, right?
Yeah, if you want that nice car, buy an asset first that's going to pay for that car.
Correct.
Because when now you've got it covered, and when that car depreciates,
right,
you've still got the asset to buy your next car, right?
Yeah.
It sounds really simple, but it's a great strategy.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And then I'm glad you brought this up too, because you mentioned something about the shiny object syndrome, which is a very common thing, right? So let's pivot that now when it comes to real estate, because one of the other things that we tend to get distracted by is, oh, there's a deal here. Oh, there's a deal here. Oh, what if I go to Alberta? Oh, what if I go to Edmonton? Oh, what if I go to Moncton? What if I go to BC? Right? You have been in the game for quite some time, right? So tell me a little bit about your experience and how you were able to kind of put your focus in one region and just kind of build around that, especially over the years, because I'm sure every year there's always every day the market is shifting and it's changing quite a bit. So can you share a little bit of wisdom and knowledge on that end?
Yeah, I mean, back in 2010 when I quit my day job, it was really easy to be super focused because I had no other income. I had to focus. I had to get these deals done.
Mm-hmm.
But after a couple of years of that, when I had a ton of doors and money was flowing pretty good, all of a sudden, about halfway through 2015, woke up one day. It's like, okay, so I've got over 50 rent-owned doors. I've got a bunch of buy, rent, and holds. We're doing an apartment block build of 48 units. We're doing a land development of 64 lots, and we're looking into Texas for something else.
Wow.
And it's like all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, it's all cool, right? Like everyone's, wow, how are you doing all that? But
right.
Midway, end of second quarter 2015, it's like, holy smokes, like we're getting nowhere on all of these projects because they were shiny objects, right? This was me and a couple other guys, and the rent own and the flip company was my own. Buy, rent, and holds were my own, but some of these other bigger projects were with other people, and so that was a tough season because one of the big things there was one of my business partners was taking money from the company, and we lost a $8 million project because of that.
Oh, wow.
So that's why I say pick your partners wisely.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the start of all that stuff when started to see this project wasn't going well. It's just like, what's going on here? And woke up in my own life that I was spread too thin, and it was all shiny object syndrome, right? And social media just feeds into that because you might have your goal and your focus, and that's really key. But then you'll be scrolling or whatever, and you'll see someone do this project where she made X amount or he cash flowed X amount. It's like, holy smokes, I got to start doing that. It's just like, but it totally diverts you from your goal. And the shiny object syndrome just robs you of that. that's why it's so important to stay focused on your goals, right? Like I just on my creative investor channel, I just did a short video on this yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually caught myself comparing myself to another dude who's doing some great stuff, but different from what I'm doing. It's just like, oh man, I feel like such a loser. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Because he's doing something that you're currently not doing. So, and we shouldn't compare ourselves to other people, period. We
Correct.
should be comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday, who we were last month, who we were last year, and have our goals so crystal clear that each day when we wake up, we are focused on doing the things that propel our goals forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we should be comparing ourselves to. And people who are doing good stuff, we should be cheerleading them on, and
Correct.
and not being jealous, not being whatever. Just say, that's awesome, way to go, man, and encourage them. And hopefully people will encourage you and I as we do stuff, but focus on our own stuff,
Yeah.
focus on our own goals to see true results. Because that's when you start to see true results, is when you get crystal clear in your goals, and then you just hammer away at them and get them done as quickly as possible.
For sure, for sure. Now, going back on the real estate side, right? So, have you been mainly focusing on one market, or has it been a vast? Like, tell me a little bit more about, like, I guess, your market right now. What does that look like right now? Are there still deals to be made? And I guess, what are some of the fundamentals that you feel comfortable investing there?
I've mostly stayed here in Manitoba just because there's just so much opportunity. I mean, we're not that big of a province. What our province is like, 1.2 million. Our city, Winnipeg here, I think, is about 700,000 people. So,
Right.
we're very small compared to, out your way and out west and all that sort of stuff. But there's just lots of opportunity. And the thing is, even now in this market with the lack of inventory on so many markets because of COVID fears and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, we're seeing places going for way more than what the numbers will work as a rental. So
Correct.
you got to buy right. And even in this market, I mean, there's places here that are going for 17 bids total on a single family.
Wow.
And basically each bid represents $5,000 increments, right? And not that they're all 17 bids, but some of them there's no bid because it's not priced right. But there are
Right.
stuff is crazy. And so, but you hear about that in Kelowna, you hear about that in the GTA, you hear about in Ottawa. It's everywhere. And I'm sure there are markets that aren't experiencing, but there are still opportunities out there. You got to change the way you look at stuff. And so, because when I started my first buy, rent, and hold, it was like, MLS and drive around looking for MLS signs. I didn't even know what FSBO signs were. And, I bought retail. I overpaid for the property. Fortunately, it worked out well. I still cash flowed. But now, even in today's market, I mean, just before, like in November, I picked up 8 properties from a tired and frustrated landlord. We ended up, me and my flipping partner, we ended up buying them because the TFL just wanted out. We got them for 35 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
And there was bidding wars in November. And so people are saying like there's no deals to be had. So it's like you're looking in the wrong places. And you can find a deal on MLS.
Yeah.
But if it truly is a deal, it's gone like that. But so it's just a matter of changing the way that you look for stuff, because everybody and their dog starting out with real estate investing is looking on MLS, right? So that's not where you want to be. You want to be looking where most people aren't looking. And so most of my deals are private, even sometimes through a realtor, right? A pocket listing,
Right.
so they're private that way. So now I've got a captive audience, right? I build rapport with the seller, and they don't even look for anybody else to buy it. They go, like, I've had multiple sellers tell me, once we met, I knew I was going to sell to you, and you just got to work out the numbers, make sure the numbers work and stuff like that. But those deals are out there, but you got to be looking for them. You got to know where to look, and you got to look for them.
So
and
that's what it comes down to, Cam, right? So for somebody who is new or is looking to scale, right? Of course, the safest bet, the easiest way is definitely, like you said, looking at retail and look at MLS. But how does one go into trying to find these off-market deals like you're expressing, right? So are you actively campaigning? How are you getting these leads, right? And what advice would you give to somebody who's starting out? How can they find these leads, whether it's wholesaling or whether it's those rent to owns, whatever it may be? Do you find that it's helpful to go through, like, say, Kijiji ads? Do you network to other folks? Do you do some flyer campaigning? Do you do cold calling? Like, what's some of the good strategies that you could recommend for folks that are looking for those type of off-market leads?
So I've actually got a TFL guidebook that unpacks your question, but that's specifically about finding tired and frustrated landlords. So
right.
For me, when I started, networking was big, making phone calls, calling for sale by owners.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any bandit signs or flyer distribution to mass. I'll do targeted flyers, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So what I'll do, for example, is I'll case out an area, and I'll drive or ride my bike, and I'll kind of note all the distressed properties. Plus, I'm also looking for sale by owners, for rent by owners, and I'm also paying attention to the ones that are listed on MLS, because I'm curious to see what is going on in the market. So, just because I've talked about not buying on MLS doesn't mean you don't access it. Definitely access it. That's how you find the true value of homes is what they sold for, right? Finding comparables.
That's right.
But so find an area and target that area. And then I've got, like a one pager, like I'll literally just go and knock on doors, and I'll just say, hey, I'm a local real estate investor. I'm looking to purchase a couple properties in this area, or one property. And I'm wondering if you know of anybody in the area who is interested in selling. And so that's one of my indirect asks that I'll do as part of my elevator pitch.
Right.
Is I won't necessarily ask directly. Oftentimes when I knock on doors, I will, but the indirect ask releases the pressure on the person I'm asking, and so they can just very graciously bow and say, "Nope, sorry, I don't know anybody. Thanks." Close the door.
Right.
Whereas if someone is in trouble with their house and I ask if I can buy their house, that can be a really sensitive subject for them. So I'll knock on doors, and I've got a one-page letter, and I've had stuff couriered to properties. I've mailed it. I've got what I call lumpy mail, that it's mail that is lumpy, that stands out from all the other mail, so that they open it. And then persistence. So one of my leads on those is finding pre-foreclosure homes, right? Houses that are en route to auction. The bank is foreclosing on them, and then trying to see if we can help them get out of foreclosure, and buying the house off them early, or structure a deal that maybe potentially keeps them in the house, all that sort of stuff. So when I started full-time doing this, I'd push myself to make X number of calls a day, on Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever, and just call for rent by owners, for sale by owners. And I've got kind of a script that I would walk through with them. So what's great about that repetition, the script is ingrained in my psyche now, and it pushed me out of my comfort zone. Yeah. Right. So it helped me with my sales, and then I would reach out to people. I would take action. Right. So if there's an opportunity that I saw on Kijiji or Facebook or whatever, I would follow up with that and actually do something about it. Not just sit behind my computer and analyze it, I'd actually go out and talk with people, shake people's hands and get to know people and hear what their headaches are, hear what the problems are, all that sort of stuff. And that just became a lot of really good experience. And so, because I've been doing it full time for the past 11 years and I've been involved in a bunch of different groups, lots of people know me. So
Yeah.
I do very little initial hunting now. And I love the hunt. I do love the hunt for finding deals. But what often happens now is that I'll get a text, phone call, email, Facebook message saying, "Hey, Cam, I've got a property," or I've got, a friend of mine or whatever. So I've got a couple different realtors that, will call me up, and those are often pocket listings and just other people. And, obviously lots of deals I can't do anything with.
Yeah.
But that's the fortunate thing about being persistent and staying with it is now I've got deals, coming to me. Lots of bird dogs out there that are sending stuff my way. But you got to put in the hard work up front.
Correct.
To do that stuff, and it can be a lot of fun. Like, unless you're making offers and then actually closing on some, the momentum won't build without it.
That's right. I think it goes with anything in life. You have to plant, you have to cultivate, and then you harvest, right? So it is basically just that, right? So, and then at the end of the day, you reap the benefits of your fruits of your labor, essentially, right? So it's just one of those things. So initial part of, like any business, the initial starting point is the hardest, but you just have to be consistent, persistent, keep going. Especially in sales. I don't know if we will realize, but real estate is all about sales. And it's about people. It's a people's business, right? So for you, I love that you mentioned, when you knock on a door, if you were to knock on my door and just say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a property," I may look at you and be like, first of all, who the heck are you? Right? I there's no rapport, right? I love that you mentioned instead of doing that, you're saying, "Hey," you're just coming a little bit more softly and saying, "Hey, like, do you know anybody that is considering selling?" To me, then that looks like, oh, okay, maybe even if I don't know, if I want to sell, maybe I can say, "Oh yeah, my neighbor is," because you seem like a legit, like genuine person, right? So I love it. It's all about approaches. It's all about talk tracks, as you know, in sales, and you will build it over time. I think I love that you mentioned that you don't have to necessarily think, "Okay, I have to perfect the pitch."
No.
Try it. Go knock on 20 doors. Try different things. Try different hellos. Try different strategies, and see what works. That's the only way you're gonna learn.
Yeah, because you got to find your rhythm, right?
Yes, that's right.
You got to find your rhythm, and you got to find out your sales approach too, right? Because like you said, real estate is all about sales. Well, you know what? Life is all about sales, right?
Correct. Yeah, you have to figure out what works for you and what works for your style. So going back to what you're saying, like, don't pretend to be someone who you're not, because it's not going to work. And people can see right through you. You can't go and pretend you're the expert of Winnipeg when you have no idea anything about the market, right? It just doesn't work, and people can definitely sense that, especially nowadays. I mean, it's no longer the whole 70s approach of car salesmen. It's all indirect sales. I think as our community is developing and generations are coming along, especially with social media, I don't think anybody's interested in direct anymore. I think it's more of an indirect approach. And the reason I'm saying this is because I'm seeing how other folks that are successful are being successful because of that approach. And I think you're kind of following the same footsteps, right?
Yeah.
And then just going back on just the rent to owns, right? I just have a question. So for these properties, do you generally focus on single family, or is it multifamily? Like, what does that look like for you, or is it a combination of both?
So for me, I've mostly focused on single family. Now I have done it with small multifamily, like 2-3 doors.
Right.
I mean, the thing is, you can do like rent own is really all about the option to purchase or not, right? It secures an asset while you figure out your exit strategy, right? So, maybe I'll buy it, maybe I won't. And so, many of your viewers will know you can use an option with a car, right? It's called a lease, right?
Right.
And it's you set up monthly payments, and You put a little bit down, and then you say, okay, in 3 years, I'm gonna buy. I'm gonna. I've got the option to buy it at X price. I don't have to buy it. I can walk away from it. There's certain
Right.
parameters that I've got, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. And so you can do that with land. You can do it with multifamily. It's just a matter of just structuring it. It's all about a win-win, right?
Yeah.
If someone's trying to unload a multifamily, what do they ultimately need right now?
And speaking of credit, I know you mentioned one of the key aspects here is someone may have, the payments and whatnot, but they just don't have the credit score. So how do you help them kind of build that over the years? I mean, one of the
Yeah,
biggest obstacles with it is a human behavior. It's very hard to change the behavior. So how do you manage
yeah,
that?
that's a great question. I mean, that is a challenge. I, I've turned people away. Yes, I've turned lots of people away, but I've had people where they had to make a decision. I said, okay, I will work with you, but you have to do these three things. And they were willing to do two of them, but not the third. And it's just like, you know what? If you don't change that one, 3 years, we're going to be right back here, and you're going to be looking at personal bankruptcy. So really, the people that we work with in terms of the rent-to-own clients are really cream of the crop people who can't get mortgages. Right now, lots of people think, well, people who can't get mortgages, they're not cream of the crop. It's like, no, it's just like it's like that thin layer on the top of the milk. That's the cream. There's all these people below that there's no way they're at the current pace that they're ever going to be qualified for a mortgage. You just don't make enough money. They have nothing saved up, all that sort of stuff. But then there's people who, make $150,000 a year, and they've got $15,000 to put down now, and they can afford over $2,000 a month. And they're going, well, why don't they just get a mortgage? They can't. That's the whole point. They can't, right? Whether if it's a sickness in the past that screwed up their credit, or some poor decisions, or often divorce wrecks a lot of people's credit.
Right.
And it's just kind of like not really their own doing, it's they're doing to each other. And so for those people, it's just basically it's a fairly simple plan. It's getting a credit specialist to pull their credit and say, okay, here's what you need to do over the next X number of months, whether it's 12 or 36 or 48.
Right.
And don't do this, don't acquire any new loans, don't buy a car, don't get a new car lease, stick with what you've got. Build up your credit score by doing these two things, and over time your credit score is going to increase to a point where banks will say yes. It's really not very difficult. It's just a matter of getting a clear picture of that goal.
That's
and
right.
then keep going towards it until that goal is complete.
So do you typically put that in writing for these folks to say, here's your plan in
Every
3
time.
years, you got to stick by
Yep.
it? And is there like an audit, or how do you keep maintain or make sure that they're following through and sticking with the plan?
Yeah. So we do regular visits with our tenant buyers. And you said it before, it's human nature. I mean, some people don't follow through, and really what they're doing is they're breaking the contract. So in my contracts, one of the things is that they've got to pull their own credit score on an annual basis minimum and submit it to my company, right? And so that's in hand. That's written in the contract, and not all of them do. And even when we ask them for it, they still don't do it.
Right.
Well,
Right.
that's a problem, right? And so we set the stage for success. They've got to bring it home. They've got to take ownership.
And then, so tell me this. I mean, as an investor, what happens if I cannot deliver in my, say, 3-year term and I can't close on it? Do you just take possession of the property and then move on to someone else? Do I lose a deposit? Do I remain as a tenant? Like, how does that work? Let's just say I'm not able to deliver my end of the bargain after, say, the 3-year term, and my credit score is horrible.
Yeah. So we'll look at it and we'll find out, okay, well, what's gone on that you haven't made the improvements, right? So, I mean, a bunch of my tenants right now, some of them have experienced job loss and have gone on, government
CERB?
Yeah, and banks right now are not looking friendly at CERB, right? They're going, you want on CERB? I don't think we want you, right? And so, when someone comes to me that and says, you know what, they had a great job, but they got let go for 4 months or whatever they went on CERB, and they're not, yeah, we'll extend the contract, right? And other reasons, there's many different reasons. I mean, we've had people lose jobs, and
Yeah.
then we kept them on. And it's all about communication, right? Because if they're proactive with us, and so it's really about working with them on that. Now, yeah, if someone walks away from it, they basically lose their rights to the property, and they have the potential of getting some money back. It's all detailed in the contract.
Okay.
But typically they walk away with not very much. I mean, the goal is for them to get into home ownership, right?
Correct.
It's not like a savings program so that if you change your mind, you get all this money back. No, because my company and my investors are putting out all the risk of owning the home so that someone can get into home ownership.
That's right.
We've got to recognize that risk in that. So yeah.
Okay. And then basically, if someone were not to close, does that not benefit you as an investor because you get to keep the property end of that term?
Yeah. So if someone leaves the program, our most of the time we'll just clean it up and we'll start over again.
Right.
So there's pros and cons with that, because the pro with that is that you're making more money on that same property, right?
That's right.
You're starting over again. You're getting new deposit. The con of that is that there are quote unquote rent own operators who set clients up for failure just so they can do that repeatedly. And that's what gives rent own a bad name a lot of times, is that people who don't know what they're doing, they set it up poorly, and people flame out of the program. Well, what do they talk about? Rent own was a bad experience for them, right? So we try to educate our clients very thoroughly before they sign paperwork.
And then how does it work? Is it treated as a lease? So say, for example, I'm not sure how it is in Winnipeg, but in here in Ontario, for instance, it's heavily favoring the tenants, right? So if somebody's tenant or the term ends, it automatically goes to month to month unless a tenant leaves or some sort of agreement comes in between us to separate. How does that work in your region?
It's very similar. I mean, that's pretty universal. In any market, there are some provinces, some states that are much more landlord friendly, make it much easier to evict somebody. But yeah, I mean, here in Manitoba, I would say it's just equally as hard as Ontario. I think we're probably two of the hardest, the most pro-tenant provinces. So it's, it's working within the law. So I follow the law, and I do what I can do within that realm, but I also will do other things, right? I've paid people to leave. I negotiate. There's many different things that you can do to help someone move on.
Yeah.
Quickly, without it being illegal, or, it's just a matter of negotiation. What do you need? Okay.
Correct.
You need some moving costs. It's way cheaper to pay someone to leave early than to endure months of headaches and non-payment and then going to court and all that stuff. It's way cheaper just to pay someone, up front.
Right. So basically, in other words, those tenants are basically assumed after those terms. So if they decide to stay even after the program ends and they don't meet the criteria, they technically are in the eyes of the law tenants. And then there's on a month to month, so you have to kind of figure out a negotiation tactic with them to end their tenancy. Correct?
Yeah. Most if someone is in the program and they don't succeed, most people move on.
Okay.
They don't stay. There's been the odd few that that will dig their heels in and stay. And yeah, that's where okay, well, they're paying above rent, like they're paying above market rent. They're paying on time. Yeah, they're a bit of a headache, but I really don't have to deal with them much. I'll just let them stay for a while. It's no big deal.
Right. So would that basic agreement continue on? So would they pay, say, market rent plus the 200 surplus, for example, that to your earlier example you gave us? Would that be still lawful, or would they be like, oh, listen, I'm no longer part of the rent to home, so I just pay the 1,200, not the 1,400, for instance, right? How does that work?
Yeah, it's how you set up in your contracts. Typically, no, they won't pay that separate amount, but there's stuff like my lease contract. I don't use the standard provincial one. I've got my own that takes into account provincial laws here.
Mm-hmm.
But then I add other stuff in there too, so I can offer them a discount in the lease, but then it can revert back to the higher price if something changes. And so there's, once you understand the contract really well, it's like you can start to, like maximum benefit.
Do you typically find the property first, or you find the tenants first? Which one comes first?
Yeah, you can do either work. I do both. I do more house first than tenant first,
Okay.
because I've had so many tired and frustrated landlords give me properties, right? I've literally sat across the table at Starbucks, and landlord had a ball of keys for 4 properties, and he slid it across the table and says, I don't know what all these keys are for, but I trust you'll figure it out, right? So that's just been kind of a natural one for me.
Okay.
I know some people that focus only on tenant first. It's about finding your rhythm and doing it that way. So in my course, I teach how to do it both ways. It's that way. So
perfect. And do you mind sharing, I guess, giving an example of one of the deals you've done recently, kind of like, just high numbers in terms of how much you invested in it? What does the deal look like? How much is the tenant or the rent to own folks are paying, and so forth, just so people understand kind of like the numbers and kind of how that works?
It's crazy because, you can make multiple profit centers on one house, right? So I've done a lot of flips, and then I've sold it to an investor, but then that house stays in my program. So I make money on the flip, and then I make money on the rent own. So this particular example, my flipping partner and I, we actually built 2 brand new homes. And so I think our total cost into it was just over $200,000 per house. Sold it to an investor for $232,000. And then that investor did the paperwork we talked about at the top of our call. And I now continued with the same property, but I now controlled it through paperwork, put a tenant buyer in there who put down $10,000 and was paying the owner $1,200 a month, and I was getting $1,450 a month on that property for 3 years.
Yeah.
So my spread on that was $350. And so the tenant buyer put down $10,000, and they're responsible for repairs in the property. Mm-hmm. After 3 years, they split up as a couple, and we got very close to him purchasing the property. And then he just called me up one day. He said, I'm done. I need to move. And so it's like, okay, so he left the property. He left some damage. So he ended up not getting any of his money back. And I used a portion of that $10,000 to make some repairs in the property. Mm-hmm. And then I filled it again with another tenant buyer last June.
Okay.
And so they put down $10,000, and they're paying $1,900 a month, and I'm now paying the owner $1,450 a month. So my spread on that now is $450.
$450, yeah.
And you plus the money down. So this is one of the crazy things about real estate, is that you don't you don't have to just make one profit on one property. This is my third profit center on the same property, and I've put $100 into it to secure the deal. Right, once I sold it, and then he put it back into our program for $100, and now I've made that profit, for 4 years running on that deal.
I know you're big on education here. So for folks that are looking to, I guess, get started or better themselves, can you name us just 3 books that you would recommend them to read?
Yeah, Essentialism by Greg McCowan, about focus. The One Thing by Gary Keller, who started Keller Williams. That is both those books are key on focus and goal setting, avoiding the shiny object syndrome. Yeah, The Richest Man in Babylon is a great book, easy read.
Perfect. And I know we can't travel right now, but if you were to go anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Anywhere near the ocean. If it's the States, Thailand, somewhere in South or Central America, that's where I'd be going.
So for folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is creativeinvestor.ca. You can find me on Instagram, Creative Investor, at Creative Investor. On Facebook, it's at Creative Invest. And Cam Roland, I'm on both those mediums and fairly active. So yeah, you can find my contact information on those medias.
Perfect. So I'll make sure to have your show notes in there, and I'll also throw in your free ebook for finding, tired and frustrated landlords, TFL, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, thanks again, Cam. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks so much, Ross. It was great having this time with you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you were able to get some great golden nuggets out of it. The kindest thing that you could do is share this podcast across all social media to help as many people as possible. If you like this podcast or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or YouTube. I love bouncing ideas, people, and I love talking real estate. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, financial freedom is just a few properties away.